Hi, everyone. This is Caroline with our expat interview, Thriving Abroad, where I love to share stories with you. And I ask amazing people to share their stories of expat life. And I am here today, and it's an honor to be with the lovely, beautiful, and talented Keturah Kendrick. Thank you so much, Keturah, for sharing your time with me and your amazing story.
Thank you
So,
for having me. I appreciate you and what you're doing, and also asking me to be a part of it. But I appreciate most of all what you're doing.
thank you. Thank you. So I don't know where to begin. We were talking about this earlier. It could take about 2 hours for to talk about everything that you've done, but we're going to do the elevator pitch version of it. So you're currently based in New York now, the Big Apple, but you have many pages of the expat travel life. Just where did you go when you decided, or what motivated you to expat abroad?
That's an excellent question that I've been asked so many times. Right before I moved abroad, during my whole entire journey abroad, and once I came back to the love of my life, New York City. The answer I still kind of give to people, which isn't a complete answer, but the best I can do is say what prompted my move abroad was just feeling like I wanted more. Um, I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana, but I've lived in New York City since I was about 26 years old, so about close to 20 years. And I loved my life in New York City as I do now that I've returned. I love my friends. I truly, truly adore the city. But I had been in New York City for about maybe, I guess, 12 or 13, 14 years. And I just felt like I want to do something else. My life is a bit too comfortable. And I've always really, really had wanderlust. Before I moved abroad, I'd already visited from a combination of fun vacation travel to doing research in India to getting like short term teaching gigs in other countries just to have a way to go somewhere for free, to be quite honest. I had already traveled to several countries. So when I was ready for something that sort of elusive more, leaving the country was the first thought that came to my mind. I wanted to travel. I wanted to be able to explore the continent of Africa. I had been to a lot of countries, and I had not been to a country on the continent before. So I was clear that if I was going to live somewhere long term, I wanted to be in a part of the world where people look like me. I thought that would make it easier. And I was just intrigued with specifically West Africa. So I guess the shortest answer now is I was bored with life, very comfortable and content, but felt I want to be able to travel and see the world more. Um, and why not now?
So your first destination was?
Rwanda, the beautiful, gorgeous, amazingly lush country of Rwanda in East Africa. Tiny little country on a map.
Why did you choose Rwanda?
I hope I do not upset my Rwandan friends and His Excellency, the great Paul Kagame. But I didn't really choose Rwanda, if we keep it 100, as the young people say. I was shooting for West Africa, specifically Ghana or Senegal. But the reality was, I'm a teacher by trade and profession, and I happened to find the most useful opportunity in international teaching in Rwanda first. So I found a job there first. And by the time I interviewed for the job, I had convinced myself and pretty much had told all the people in my life I was leaving and going to Africa. So I didn't want to necessarily wait to keep digging to find something in West Africa. I figured if I was living on the continent, I could just travel to all the countries I thought I was going to live in. So Rwanda kind of chose me, I guess.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense logistically if you want to explore Africa to just be there first and
Yeah.
go to other places. What was it like? Was that your first expat experience or?
It was. It was my
Okay.
first time living in another country. Before I moved to Rwanda, the longest I'd been in another country was in India for 6 weeks. I was doing a teacher exchange program in Kolkata, but this was my first intentional. I'm leaving the country. Like I sold all my books. That's how serious I am about it. It was it was an incredibly enriching experience, mostly because of the friendships I formed with mostly other Black expat women. Friend Pam, who is British Ghanaian, who was in Rwanda for about a year under contract. My friend Donna Lee, who is Jamaican, who has been in Rwanda about 6 or 7 years now. I enjoyed the beauty of the country. I enjoyed being in Rwanda because it gave me access to about 13 other nations on the continent that I traveled to as often as my bank account and my vacations and my holidays from school allowed. I enjoyed There's something about, I think, the cultural richness of all the different countries on the continent that I deeply, deeply miss now. I mean, I was in Rwanda for only 2 years and I went to China after that. And while I enjoyed my time in Shanghai, I found myself just having moments where the quietness of Rwanda specifically, the the way that I could sort of see the history of me and all of my people just walking down the street or eating dinner with friends or having conversations with Rwandans or expats, there was a comfort and a contentment in being on the continent specifically. And I find Rwanda, as people would tell me, it's a nice soft fall for your first time in Africa. So it was quiet, it was safe, it was ridiculously clean. Rwandans are very much respectable in nature. So it was just a really calm, serene, content, peaceful environment. I miss more so Africa specifically, and not just necessarily Rwanda. I miss the friendships that I made in Rwanda, the beauty of it. Like, I do not underestimate how absolutely gorgeous that country is. If you go for no other reason, it should be able to see how beautiful the country is.
Yeah, I've seen pictures. It's definitely on my list.
It should
You're
be.
single,
I am.
so going there single, what was that like being there? How do they treat single women, especially American women?
Well, here's the thing, and this is what I found a pattern in many countries on the continent. And I got to experience it, I guess, more in depth in Rwanda since that was my home base. So if you are a woman who is over the age of 27 ish, you cannot truly call yourself a woman in many African cultures if you do not have a husband or a child. That is just the reality of how African cultures work. I've heard some people describe it as very traditional, very family friendly. And if you are a woman who desires those things, I've known single women, especially Black American women who prefer dating men of the African diaspora. I've heard them go to these countries in order to be able to meet a man who truly took, you cannot be an adult until you have a family, as a sort of personal creed. Howsoever, I am single by choice and child free by choice. Neither of those roles have ever appealed to me. Not anti marriage, not anti motherhood. I've just known for as long as I can remember that didn't necessarily, it wasn't going to be my journey.
Yep.
So I will say that being in a culture like Rwanda as a single child free woman of a certain age was difficult. And not in the sense that I felt, oh, I feel so bad. I'm going to another wedding yet again, and I don't have a ring. What was difficult was about it was trying to understand how people still could believe this was the only way to do adulthood in the century of our Lord, the 21st. Um, and so I encountered, not so much because many of my friends were either expats or what they called returnees, Rwandans who had lived abroad, especially during the war. And so they had some sort of other perspective. And while they were choosing marriage and motherhood, they could see how, okay, you don't want it, fine. But it was interesting because I would encounter men and women who didn't know what to do with me. And I think, especially being a heterosexual woman who enjoys, unfortunately, men, I have no choice but to enjoy them. This is the way God made me, as they say. You deal with what you got, right?
Right, right.
Dating, especially as a mature woman, a woman who's in her late 30s, men not understanding. So you aren't going to pressure me into a ring. And if you do get a ring, you still will be taking birth control. So why you here? And you don't just want to have some sex. Like, I don't understand what you mean, because I think in that, and when the culture is dating for fun or dating just to date doesn't exist outside of high school. You're really on interviews for potential husband and father of your child. In the absence of that, there can be no in between. There can be no sort of serious committed relationship. You are kind of being young and childish, I guess, and you're thinking it just doesn't make sense. So I think in that sense, it was difficult and a bit bizarre sometimes. Some of the situations I would find myself in, and the conversations I would have, that I underestimated would happen being outside of the US. Because in New York City, especially, you can throw a brick through Brooklyn and hit about 50 stores.
Yep.
So I guess I underestimated um, how, again, if I'm being honest, not even traditional, I call it patriarchal, how patriarchal a lot of the philosophies in a lot of African nations can be.
So having said that, were you able to date?
Oh,
Um,
most definitely. Like, I
okay.
felt in and out of love a whole. I didn't date too much in Rwanda for a series of reasons that any single woman in Rwanda who's watching this right now already knows. But like I said, I traveled a lot. I was in love for about 6 to 8 months with a Ghanaian man who I met on one of my travels, and we attempted a cross continent relationship, which ended up, clearly it didn't last as long as we both would have hoped. And I went on some dates in Rwanda, but I traveled a lot and met the men folk through my travels. So I was able to date around the continent, a little bit in Rwanda, but really just sort of casual, let's have a drink, let's go get a brochette, and never really went too much.
So is there anything you feel like a setup, like say, for example, a single woman who's thinking, considering going to Africa alone, or maybe even with a child, like maybe a single parent? Are there any setups mentally that you need before you go there? I mean, are you going with knowing that the in general, right? Because we're just generalizing the African continent, the men, the culture there are looking for settle down type of relationships. You're my woman, I'm your man, we're a family, as opposed to just casual dating.
I think if you are a woman, single, with or without child, I think it helps you to be clear on what you consider your ideal romantic relationship and what you consider to be your definition of proper womanhood and proper adulthood. I think you should just be aware that if you are a single American woman, the assumption is if you're not, on the quest for a ring, then clearly you're easy, because I think a lot of the the media that makes it abroad, like movies and stuff, especially romantic comedies, it features women who just sort of have sex immediately. And not that I'm anti casual sex, you grown, do what you want to do. I do think the perception is, in absence of, again, you were looking for a father for your child because you made a mistake and went had this child without getting a ring. And if you don't have a child, when you are dating and you're over the age of, again, late 20s, then clearly you are razor sharp focused on marriage. And if that is not you, because again, I've met several women who, for whom that was their story, some were successful, some were not when they got to the continent. But if that is not you, you need to be clear on what who you are and what you really do want out of a relationship, and make that clear as soon as it's necessary to make it clear to a gentleman caller, and be prepared for some sort of passive aggressive attempts to make you feel like you are wrong, or that you're being coy, or that people to try to help you become a better woman in a sense. So I think just being completely clear on what your definition of partnership and relationship and how you want to formulate dating and romantic relationships. Because there's really only one, I found only one dominant thought process in the minds of many local Africans about what an adult relationship over the age of 27 looks like. And if it's not that, then clearly it's this other waste of time thing.
Do you feel like the culture, I know they portray it on TV when, I mean, we've heard stories about it where they're just looking for the visa, the American visa, the woman that can, I mean, did you find that in your time there that uh, that's something that they keep in the back of their mind, or that's their pursuit as opposed to a real relationship?
To be quite honest, what I witnessed more and what I experienced more in my own dating and relationships is not the green card grabber. I think that stereotype of that image exists, I think, in a lot of reality TV like 90 Day Fiance, a show I thoroughly enjoy. But I don't think, especially in the expats and the locals who I would come in encounter with, that applies to them, because most of the locals who dated, male and female, were educated, middle class. So
Oh,
they,
okay,
yeah,
okay.
they weren't necessarily looking for, like, they weren't 19-year-old college men and women who needed extra money. I'm sure that existed, and I've heard stories.
Sure, but it wasn't prevalent in your
No,
circle.
yeah, exactly. What I saw prevalently were women who, because they had Western privilege, although they had the same education and skill set as their male counterparts, their Western privileges and sometimes their white skin allowed them more access, even in Africa, than their African husbands or fiancés or boyfriends, which is a certain set of complications, but it's not the same thing as, some 75-year-old grandma from London who's giving her pension to the 20-year-old Idris Elba looking dude on the beach. I didn't I didn't see that. I saw a lot of 30s, mid 30s partnerships with a Western woman and an African man. Both had been educated. They met probably through some sort of work function, and they coupled. And when they shared with me the complications, it sounded a lot like when you are an accomplished, educated woman in your country dating a blue collar man, but the gap is even wider because of Western privilege, not just class privilege in your country.
Okay, that's very interesting. Very interesting. It's nice to hear your perspective on that. So I'm excited. You're a published author, and I was looking a little bit at your book that I can see there. No thanks. And I was,
Just
yeah,
happens to be
you have.
there
I know you
by
have.
accident.
It just happens to be
It
there.
happens to be right there on the shelf.
But I'm glad. I'm glad because I wanted to bring that up. Tell us about your book, No Thanks. I love the title, and I love the concept, but what inspired you to write this book? It's for women.
Yes, it is. In many ways, I'm inspired by what I can make an educated guess is the same thing that inspired you to start this channel, to start your Facebook group of Black women who are thriving abroad. It was written because I rejected, throughout my 45 years on this planet, I rejected a lot of the things that a good Black woman is supposed to want, and it is assumed will be the only road to her feeling contentment and joy. I've rejected marriage. I've rejected motherhood. I've rejected Christianity and the construct of this God being determining my fate. I've rejected this concept that in order to be a good daughter or a good sister, or a good auntie, you have to live within a 6 block radius of your people. So when they need you, you can come running to them. Um, I've left my home city where my whole family was, and I left my country where my family and friends were, because the journey of my life dictated this is the path that I'm on. And while I love all of you and I care about you, this is going to work what's best for me. So my book is called No Thanks, Black, Female, and Living in the Martyr Free Zone, because as I traveled abroad, I actually started writing it the last few months when I was in Rwanda. And I finished it by the time I was midway through my stint in Shanghai. The more I traveled and met all of these amazing women in Rwanda, um, Rwandan women who had been abroad, Black expat women from across the globe. And when I was traveling to other countries as a tourist on the continent, I kept meeting women who I didn't see reflected enough in mainstream pop culture, especially. And I didn't see our stories of, while those things that people have told us will make us happy, some of us wouldn't mind having, but for the most part, we are out here thriving and in loving the hell out of our lives. Like whether that involves what we're supposed to want, the God-fearing man with the babies and being the head church mother, whether or not we have that, or if we have none of that, we are living amazing lives, and we are living those amazing lives because we are living lives that have been dictated by our voice and our choices. And I think the book came out of just realizing that what I thought made me unique wasn't unique. It just wasn't reflected enough in a dominant culture. There are many versions of me in Africa, in Rwanda, in Ghana, in Shanghai, in Thailand. There are many versions of me. We just don't see it enough.
That's interesting. Now, does this apply? I guess you were inspired while being an expat, but do you feel that it just across the board, whether you're in the United States or you're in China or you're in Rwanda or Thailand, do you feel that these issues for Black women specifically, do you think that it's just across the board, or depending on the countries that we go to, do you find different us having to adjust to different issues, or us having to be a certain way or act or talk a certain way?
I think what I've seen with Black women across the diaspora is there is an expectation that if you are a woman who wears Black skin, it is your duty to sacrifice yourself for the greater good, whatever that greater good might be. Um, which is why when you talk to a lot of, particularly in a Black American context, you talk to a lot of Black American women who have moved abroad as opposed to their male counterparts, quite often you will find they were more conflicted. They were more, well, when my mama said that she was worried, or when my sister said, well, we need you to do X, Y, and Z, even though they still went, right? They still went abroad. They were the more like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't do it because all of this other stuff. As opposed to the male counterparts, their conflict or their sort of last minute jitters were more attached to what if I don't succeed or what if it doesn't work out. There wasn't as much on their backs of I have to sacrifice my dream or my goal because all these other people need me. And I find across the globe, particularly with Black women, um, the message that it is somehow in our magic to suffer in silence, and for everybody in the family or the community, the gas station attendant, the pastor, whoever wants us to suffer, we should consider, we should do that. I think that is something I found across the diaspora. Now that not every woman will listen to that voice, but I find that when I talk to Black women, if you listen carefully when they tell their stories, especially when it's a story of I had to make this difficult choice whether to choose me, underlying that is them having to make an explicit decision to not martyr themselves. And then they made that choice not to martyr themselves, but they were clear that that was expected of them, and they just chose not to do it.
Okay, that's interesting. Um, so I wanted to get your opinion. I left the US 12 years ago, plus. I keep saying 12, but it's probably even more now. And, at a time when there wasn't a lot of expat, there wasn't a lot of migration. You left after I did. And probably then it wasn't as intense as it is now.
It's exploded
Now,
in the last 5 or 6 years, I think.
yeah. So now we have the Black woman is looking to do the Black sit. We want to get out, let me out of here. What do you foresee now that there's this flood of Black women that are looking to get out and just change our lives, our narrative? What are your thoughts on that?
I think what a great time to be alive. Because essentially, what's happening is Black women are seeing we have options. I think we've had them for much longer than we are willing to admit, but we're now starting to see that there are options. We're starting to see that we can choose to stay here in the US. I chose to come back. I will likely leave for good again in about 10 or 15 years and I'm ready to retire. But that we have options that you can choose to stay here next to your mama if that's what you want, or you can choose to move to Playa del Carmen. You can choose to move there with a family. You can choose to move there on your own, eventually have a family or not. And you won't be alone, I think, because one of the things that my first few years abroad, I would have people back home being shocked that there were Black people in all these places that they didn't think there were. Like when I was in Africa, clearly they're like, oh, of course. But especially when I was in Shanghai and I would post these events I was going to, or when I would be visiting other parts of the world and I would post being hanging out with Black people, they're like, got Black people there. So it's like, I think it's exciting for me because I think Black women are now seeing I can be the master of my destiny and I can create a life with intention. I don't have to just accept a life. I can choose it, whether it's the standard life that my mother chose and my grandmother chose, or whether it's a different one. So I am excited to see there are more Black American women who are starting to see I don't have to settle or do any one particular thing. That if I put my mind to it, there are resources and there is a community of other Black folk. There is no corner of this globe where we not at. You're gonna find at least one Nigerian somewhere. If you don't find a Nigerian in a place, don't move there because something wrong with that place. You're gonna find a community anywhere on this globe,
Yeah,
and if you choose with intention and you have the strength of purpose and mission, you will be fine anywhere on this earth, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm excited about it.
is writing? Would you say it's therapeutic for you to write for Black women? We, historically, we don't always spill our emotions, spill our guts out to each other. Just like let's get on the real and just real talk. Do you find it to be therapeutic? I mean, do you recommend it for women that?
Um, Therapeutic, I'm not sure if I would choose that word. I think what I find writing, especially for Black women, because I'm clear on who my target demographic is, I'm clear on who I am ride or die for. And it is, quite frankly, only Black women. So I find writing for Black women, especially once No Thanks hit, and I got so much response from Black women who've made all sorts of choices, right? I think for me, it feels fulfilling because I have always known that my mission in life is, even when I was in my 20s and I wasn't quite sure how I would achieve it. I was always clear that my mission in life was to make this world safer for women, children, and people of color. For 15 years of my life, I've done that through teaching Black and Brown children, especially in New York City. Um, the next phase of my life, I'm clear that it is being a writer, a speaker, a thought leader. So I find I've always written since I was in my 20s. And I'm at a point now in my life where I am razor sharp focused on why I write, more so than just want people to say, oh, I love you. You made me feel so wonderful. But I know why I want to write. And I feel like it connects me with the people for whom I am ride or die. And that is Black women.
I love it. I love it. And how do we connect? How do we get our hands on this amazing book that you have shared your thoughts
Wonderful.
with us? No
Well,
thanks.
the book,
You have others. Okay. You have no thanks and you have a few
no,
other books as well. Okay.
no, I have no thanks. I'm working on an ebook only that'll be out in this year on that are specific travel stories from my shenanigans abroad. But this is my
Oh,
first book. Yes, no thanks. Black, female, and living in the martyr-free zone. You can go to my website, and there are some links to the standard retailers. KeturahKendrick.com. It's available on Amazon, Target, Goodreads,
okay.
Barnes and Noble.
Okay.
I truly, truly humbly ask that you go through some of the indie portals, the indie retail shops like bookshop.org or indiebound.org. Because let's just be real, Bezos a billionaire. He don't need your money. But if
It's true.
Amazon, I get Amazon is easier. We're used to it. So it is on Amazon. But you can click on my website. There's an IndieBound link that'll put you to a local bookstore that can get you the book. Yeah, so my website, you can follow me on Instagram, all Keturah Kendrick, Facebook, Keturah Kendrick. Yeah,
And you said you have a future ebook coming out?
yes, my future ebook. Like, please do not email me about it now because I have yet to write it. But I have a title. It will be called How to Avoid Foolery and Foul Play Travel Stories. And it'll feature I think, three of the most comical shenanigans in which I have found myself as a woman traveling alone and how I've avoided cishet male foolishness and quite literally possible foul play from being a smart solo traveler. And my goal is by summer to have that available on Amazon as an ebook. It'll be a short, like, I don't know if you can call personal essays a novella, but it'll be like 3 stories, maybe 10,000 words, something like that. So we'll see.
Great, great. That is awesome. Keturah, thank you so, so much
You for
for
having me.
spending this time and sharing your thoughts and your dreams and your passions and your travels. And I hope that, our women will get a takeaway from this, go out and live your dreams and fearless that we are.
Yes. Do you all over the globe? You'll find a tribe. Trust me, we everywhere. You will not be alone.
Anywhere our passport can take us, there we are.
And your passport will get you pretty far, even though we live in the ghetto. You
Yes.
know, it will get you pretty far.
Well, all the best to you for the new year. Happy New Year. Many blessings. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.